He has commanded Curtis Wilbur, Decatur, and Destroyer Squadron 31. And he's had flag assignments at Commander U.S. Naval Forces Korea, Commander Task Force 78, and as Commander Carrier Strike Group 11. And it's with a focus on that last assignment in particular that we invited him to come today. We've been talking a lot about a lot of different things here, and there's a lot going on here inside the Beltway. So we were interested to have a flag officer's perspective who's recently come back from the fleet to kind of give us that operational and waterfront view. Admiral Gumataotao, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Admirals Rout, Riley, Conley, Boxall, McManaman, and last but not least, Franchetti. And I hope I didn't miss any of the admirals that came here today. And so all of the SNA members and the Navy fans that all made a point to take this lunchtime and come here and celebrate with us with the SNA Association, thank you very much for being here. Secondly, a good Master Chief that retired, I remember in a speech told me once, I hope you thank those when it matters. And so for those that organized it, Dave and MK and also the National Committee and all the board members of SNA, if you're here, please stand up for a second. Dave, stand up. Commander Hayes and all the national members, Admiral, please stand up. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so I asked Dave to come up and introduce me sooner than later, because the only way that this presentation that I'm going to give you this afternoon is relevant is if I hear from you, and then I touch on the points that you want to hear about. And so when Dave Welch asked me to talk to you, he said, you can talk about strike group operations. And I go, well, you know, you should narrow it down a little bit more, because you can talk a lot about strike group operations, and I know many folks out here have been there and done that. And some of the uniformed folks have not been there and done that. And so hopefully I'll put a perspective for you in there. So just to kind of frame this piece here, I'm going to say a few things about what it is to be a strike group commander in the 21st century, greatest Navy in the world. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to maybe toss up maybe 3 questions or 4 that may be relevant to you, but you didn't know how to ask it, or you don't know what you don't know, so you didn't know how to start. And I'm going to tee it up from my angle. And then finally, I'm going to open it up, and this is why I'm prepping the battlefield. I am opening up to you for you to ask me any questions. And it doesn't have to be strike group operations. It could be anything. Heck, you can talk about Korea. I can talk about Korea because I lived there for 2 years as CNFK. I can talk a lot about other things that you have in your mind, because all of you are fans of the Navy, and it's really great that you do come over here to kind of learn about it. So here's the bottom line up front about a Carrier Strike Group Commander. From my perspective, in a word, I had a blast. Okay? And some people go, okay, yeah, sure, right. No, seriously, if you think about this from my perspective, I did a lot of things that I did from the old days. You know, when I have my shipmates here, we talk about the old days, you know. Gosh, I look around the room. That's why I was going around, by the way. There's shipmates here from Curtis Wilbur. There's shipmates here from Decatur. There's shipmates here from Desron 31. There's shipmates here from 7th Fleet. In those old days, the only reasons, 2 reasons why I stayed in the Navy, to be honest, because my wife always asked me, hey, is this the last command? Okay, so you at command, so is this it? And I said, well, we'll see, hon, we'll see. But the 2 reasons, and the main reasons why I stayed in the Navy, the first one is because it is an honor to serve our country. It really is. And growing up in Guam, where we understood when the Americans came back in World War II and liberated Guam, July 21st, we celebrated every year. To wear our country's cloth from Guam was awesome. It was an honor. It still is. So that's one thing. And I think that resonates with everybody in this room. The other thing is not as obvious, but it's our sailors. It's our shipmates. It's our shipmates that come back and to see another shipmate talk about why they stayed in the Navy. It's that energy I get when I'm out in the fleet. It's that inspiration that I get from a seaman. Here's a story for you. ABH-3. Aviation's bosun mate handler, up on the flight deck on USS Nimitz. He is a yellow shirt. working with the plane captain who was a brown shirt. Now, if you know anything about aviation, and by the way, I learned a lot as a SWO about aviation, the plane captain is in charge of the crew that takes care of the plane and hands it off to the guys that are going to launch at the shooter up on the flight deck. Interestingly enough, I learned that the plane captain is the youngest person on that team. Isn't that something? At first, as a SWO, I go, what the? But then I realized there's so much responsibility, and that young airman is out there moving a lot of big parts and pieces, and they come out of there empowered. But anyways, back to this ABH-3. So he's a handler. He's running around, yellow shirt. They were next to this F-18 Hornet. The signal was to power up, but she thought it was to power down. She got too close to one of the intakes when they were powering up, and she started to get sucked into one of the intakes. Immediately, ABH-3 didn't hesitate. Immediately, that ABH-3 grabbed on to the plane captain's legs and saved her life. Of course, they shut the engine down. The only thing that got sucked into the engine was the cranial. You know, you lose an engine, I don't care. I lose a shipmate, it's devastating. So in between flight ops, I call up to the captain, I go, hey, CO, I want to go meet ABH-3 Simpson. That's his name. And I go, I want to go shake his hand and give him a coin from the Admiral, because we were out there operating out in the Pacific somewhere. And so they were all in flight deck center, you know, where they have the pucks, flight deck control, where they have all the pucks and they move all the stuff around. Well, that's where all the handlers and all the guys were in there, and they all knew the Admiral was coming up. Really, I didn't want a big thing about it. I just wanted to give the guy a coin and say thank you. You know what that young ABH-3 said to me? He must have been like 19 years old. He said, sir, I don't know what the big fuss is. I was just doing the right thing. And then the chief said, sir, try to take him off the line, because we were all shaken up about it. He didn't want to come off the line. And the first thing out of his mouth, sir, was, how is my plane captain doing? How is my plane captain doing? So I go back to you as to why I stayed in. It's because of those sailors. It's because of my shipmates that inspired me to be the best combat systems officer, the best XO, the best CO, whatever it is. I was inspired to do a lot of things. So when I tell you I have a blast, I did a lot of the old things. I went around, you know, 54, 53 years old, running around on a helo, going out to my destroyers, going into the engine rooms, talking to the wardroom, hanging out in the mess decks, much to the chagrin of the CO who had a little, thing that I wanted to do. And I talked to the sailors, and I got on the 1MC, and I told them how proud I am. I did all those old things. But I also had a blast because I did a lot of new things. You know where my quiet place was on a carrier? It was the Pri-Fly, primary flight control. If you've ever been on a carrier, it's way up there. What deck is it, Dave? It's like the 10th deck? I don't know. But I'll be out of breath by the time, but it's a quiet place for me. It's the tower. You know, remember Top Gun? Remember when the guy was drinking coffee and Goose and, what's his name, came by and it shook a coffee? That's the Pri-Fly. Every carrier has a Pri-Fly. I didn't know that. You know, when I was a Sea Combat Commander, I didn't have time to go up to Pri-Fly, to look at all the planes and look at where the Marshall Point was at. But interesting enough, when I went up there, my quiet place, because nobody was looking for me, they didn't know where to find me, I talked to the air boss. I talked to the mini boss. And then I just asked him like a SWO would. Surface warfare officer will ask you a lot of questions if you don't know what you're doing. So I would say, hey, so why are you looking back and why are you looking forward? And what's that guy back there looking at for the guy that's coming around? And then by the time we were done with our underway operations, I knew a lot about what they did. So I learned a lot of new things. I learned a lot of new things. And then back to the third reason why I had a blast. Because I had a chance to go out and see the sailors, go see the gear dogs, go see the combat grapes, go up there to Fallon and actually see those aviators. You know, we give the aviators a lot of grief, don't we? But those guys pay in spades in terms of what they do up in Fallon, and they come back. And they come back and they work as a team. So as I sit here and I think about what does it mean to you? There's a lesson in that in itself, I think. Doesn't matter if you're retired, doesn't matter if you're in another profession, doesn't matter if you're in 04 thinking about what am I going to do in life, what am I going to do in the Navy. That lesson of what I just talked to you about having a blast, it's this, you know, if you're enjoying, if you're learning, and if you're in a group that feels they're relevant, if all those three, even one of those three is real in your life, you're actually pretty blessed. But if all three of those, about enjoying it, learning, and being relevant, come together as a fused package, voila, that was me as a strike group commander. And I share that with you because that is a lesson to be learned about what you do day in and day out. It is not just a daily trudge of, oh yeah, I got to collect this, I got to cross the T's and dot the I's. It's really about how you make a difference now. And I was talking to a whole bunch of, I think, 260 surface warfare candidates from the Naval Academy that all signed up to be SWOs. And last week I was up there talking to them. They were all excited. You know what the first thing I told them? I said to them, you know what, the world guarantees you nothing. That's the first thing I told them. I mean, I'm the super most optimistic guy, but I just wanted to tell them, hey, wake up. There is no entitlement here, midshipman. I said, the world owes you nothing. And I think this room here, who's very, very seasoned, understand that. But I said, your decisions that you make, many opportunities will come to you, whatever those decisions are. And I said, your decision to become a surface warfare officer in the greatest Navy in the world will give you many opportunities. You must seize it. Nobody's going to give it to you. That was my message to them. And I tell you to you too, because as I enjoy, as I learn, and as I embraced why I really stayed in the Navy, the core of our Navy is not the equipment. Core of our Navy is, you know, not a lot of other things that we do. It's our sailors. You know, some of my friends like Joe Spada, you know, Joe and I were joking about, hey Pete, you managed to stay away since 1998. No, actually the real thing is I managed to stay out in the fleet, Joe, since 1998. And that's really got me excited about doing life, you know. I see Rick Easton here, and he knows about how excited I am. I know I'm going to give you guys some time for questions. I will. But let me tell you something about Rick Easton, okay? I can tell a lot of good stories about you, but this struck a good leadership chord with what you did one time. I was a CEO of the greatest destroyer in the world, you know, USS Decatur, and you were the CEO of the greatest cruiser of the world, Port Royal, all right? And you gave me a call one time, and you said, hey, I got this sailor. He's not doing too well here in Port Royal, and if he stays any longer, he's probably not going to do too well in the Navy. You know, he goes, I was thinking about you, Pete. What do you think about taking this sailor and having a fresh look? You know, the first thing in my mind, I go, I don't know, man. I got a lot of things going on. I go, you know what, sir? I'll try it. Bring him over, and I'll talk to him first. And he did. And Rick gave him a new leash in life, and that sailor, sir, he served his country honorably. And your gut sense was right. I had to say that because I just thought about, you know, why we stay in the Navy. To take care of our sailors, to lead our sailors, and to give them an environment. I think Secretary Mabus said it to us when he talked to the All-Flag Officer Conference about 3 weeks ago. You know, he had those 4 Ps. The first P is people. And I remember he said, we must be faithful to our sailors. We must take care of our sailors and give them that environment where they can be the best they can be. I thought about you then, Rick, when he said that, and I'm glad you're here. Okay, so let me just move forward and ask questions that you might ask, and then I'll open it up. You know, what was my first order of business as a strike group commander? There's nothing technical here. My first order of business was to build a team. Now you think about this. As a strike group commander, you have many different organizations that come into your respective command, and you got to make them all think like one team. You got the aviators, right? So you got CAG, you got Super CAG, and you got CAG with all the air wing squadrons under him. Then you've got the Commodore that supports the CAG, they're the Helo squadron. And then you've got the other aviator who drives ships, and that's the CEO of the carrier. and he's got an entire community under him. Then you've got the Desronians. I have to pause for a moment. The Desronians, they bring in, I mean, Desron 23 had 9 ships, and by the time I was done with my tour, they had 12 ships. And then you've got the cruiser, USS Antietam, or Princeton. Princeton was our whiskey. So you had a whole mixed bag of folks, and you come together, and my first guidance to them was build my team. And to all of you, it is not a philosophical thing when you say build a team. And to be honest, it is a lot more tangible than we always sometimes give it credence. Because the center of team is trust. That one word, if you don't have trust, if there is no trust on these tables, imagine these tables as life rafts. And we're floating out there in the Pacific. And if you do not have trust amongst the folks in that life raft, you will not make it. And so I told my guys, don't build the trust just blindly because you have this pin or you have this qualification. I said, build the trust on competence right off the bat. And I said, speak your mind. And I said, once we air it out and we give a direction, then we execute violently with such great loyalty. And I said, you all play in the sandbox well, because that is my expectation of you. And you know what? It has paid dividends for me so many times out that when I see my children, you know, my warfare commander barons that are all super type A, working with each other, sharing limited resources, and asking each other, how can I better help you in that thing? It was like, it was a doctorate, you know, philosophical degree, exclamation point for me. I go, thank you, dear God. This was beautiful. And so, sorry, I'm just, you know, this thing times out, and that's where my notes are at. But I just want to say that I have just been very blessed, and I think the people that are here in this room, many of you have been a part of my success. I hope I thanked you when it mattered. I hope I thanked you, and I hope you know that I am a product of everything that you guys have done to make my life such a full and blessed way. And so I stand here humbly to tell you this, as a former strike group commander, because I have that title now, and a former strike group commander, I would say that your actions do matter. Your friendship and your support of the surface warfare community matters so much in terms of what we do day in and day out. And remember, if you ever lost your way, think about what's the most important thing, the most important resource in our Navy. And think about the efforts that you can to support our sailors, those young men and women that don't know what they don't know when they're 18, and that they choose to serve in the United States Navy. And then the last thing I would say to you is, another question I would ask is, what kept me up at night? I'll answer that from 2 angles, daily and from the operational perspective. You know, daily, risk to force, risk to mission. You've heard that phrase, risk to force, risk to mission. I always look at what we do daily to set my people up so that they can answer our country's call at whatever time and at whatever moment. And with competing resources, there's always a risk to force that they are not ready. So you get them, focus. And so the daily churn for any commanding officer or a strike group commander is to focus your team. Because, hey, they'll follow you over a cliff if you focus them over a cliff, but that's not good. What you gotta do is you gotta prioritize and then just point the way and then let them build the road. But you gotta do that constantly, I found out. You know, it is a lot of work, day in and day out. And your message is that message of the LPO, the leading petty officer, and the LCPO, and the watchman supervisor. It's that messenger on the quarterdeck has to be the same message as your message. When it is coming from their lips, vice your lips, that is the kind of daily churn that I have to do, that in order for it to really work, everybody down the chain has to buy it. From an operational level, I will tell you, you know, submarines are still a problem. Submarines still scare us in the vital area. And so we use a lot of our resources. And by the way, the 60 Romeo, if you're part of the 60 Romeo community, awesome asset out there in a strike group. With this dipping sonar and is able to go out with the EO/IR capability, be able to link back on link 16. I mean, there's just so much we can do with that platform that we have yet to realize. But the other thing that really caught my surprise in this global commons environment in the 21st century, and when I talk global commons, I think you all understand what that means, right? The interoperability, the networking, the integration that we rely on so much could be also our Achilles heel. And so what we found as a strike group during our workups is that 3rd Fleet and CSFTP, Commander Strike Force Training Pacific, did everything they can to deny our comms and do everything to make our life miserable as we fought off the bad guys for an extended period of time. And I have to tell you, that kept me up at night. They intruded us. They found ways to make our life miserable. Where you think you're in a nice warm eddy in this world of communications, because what do, right? You come up on SIPR. You come up on secure comms. You come up and you rely on satellite communications. You rely on it so much that you take it for granted, and then all of a sudden the big Pumbaa from the sky, I know Admiral Beeman said it to me, he goes, Pete, before you get underway, we're talking our certification now. He goes, we're going to make it a little bit hard on you. And, here I am. I go, bring it on, sir, bring it on. By the 2nd week, I was going, oh, God, this hurts. This really hurts. But I tell you what, the greatest part of our Navy is our ability, and don't let anybody fool you, okay? And I'll end it with this. The greatest thing about our Navy is our ability to innovate, our ability to integrate, communicate, and go out there and find a solution to something. Yeah, go ahead and throw it at us. But you got to throw it at us. I mean, we got to learn. We got to pick up and do it. But that is our greatest viability, I think, as the United States Navy. And give it to those TAOs. Give it to those young 05 COs and go, what do you think? And watch their people right behind them. We solve these problems. We solve these 21st century problems. And at the end of the day, I will take the cut of the jib of our U.S. sailor against any country in the world. But we should never be complacent. So what we did with the strike group was a good thing. What was good for the strike group was a sobering thing. And those guys came up with a lot of solutions to communicate and fight the war. And yes, we did, because the Nimitz is now deployed. Yes, we passed. Yes, we certified. And I said to Admiral Beeman, thank you very much, sir. Thank you for all the love. But anyways, I'll stop there. Trying to look at a time hack. And I'm going to open it up for any questions. Oh, yes, sir.
John Klein from Melvin Systems America, kind of at a strategic level, looking at, former Navy guy, but also now, one of the areas we're looking is how the influence of air-sea battle, both from a team perspective, organizationally, as we interact in ways with those services, and then materially as well. So, within the confines of our discussion here, can you elaborate on those areas? I think they're all industry. Sometimes we tend to focus too much on the material aspect, maybe some organizational opportunities rather than challenges that we work with the Air Force.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for that question. For some that are not as familiar with air-sea battle, let me just kind of give you a quick 101 on air-sea battle. So back in 2009, SecDef says, Air Force, Navy, take a look at this. Going into a theater and having the ability to access into a theater, given all the potential roadblocks that you will get in this global commons. And a lot of the actual threats that are out there were real. But as Navy and Air Force was working this issue, and after everything we learned about joint operations, we figured out that it's really not just an Air Force Navy thing. It's not just an air-land battle thing. It encompasses all of the global commons to include overland. Because if you're talking about access into a theater, in this A2AD world, anti-access area denial, you must look at it from the holistic approach. And that's why the Army and the Marine Corps have partnered with the Navy and the Air Force to come up with these things to be able to have the warfighters look at where their seams are at, and then we can actually help in some of the TTPs and other things. Let me step back a little bit. The one thing that we have to do is we have to have some institutional commitment. And when it started with the SecDef, that kept the ball rolling. And it had all the service chiefs going, we're in this. We understand the challenge. We understand the problem. We're going to do this. And then that institutional change needs to translate to the cultural piece where the way services think. You know, Navy, we got to work with the Air Force. Air Force, you got to get call for fire from the Army guys. Here's the thought process for you to simplify air-sea battle. I don't really care if I was a strike group commander where the queuing came from and where the actual acquisition of that target came from, and the tracking of that target came from, and where the actual, you know, missile or weapon takes that guy out, or that threat out. It was the Army, you know, system that takes it out of the sky. I really don't care. It has to be a collaborative effort. So when you think of air-sea battle, sir, think of network integrated attack in depth to be able to deter and disrupt and destroy if we have anybody that's out there that prevents us from going into a theater in terms of access. And then once you're there, you have to be able to maneuver freely in this AOR. And if you think about global commons, that's very, very hard to do. So when you think of ASB, think of it as we support the warfighters. And who is the warfighters? The combatant commanders. And they are showing us they are working side by side with the Navy in terms of developing medals, mission essential tasks, and also implementation things so that we can move ahead to do two things. Number one, TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. That we change our service-oriented tactics, techniques, and procedures, and we work from an integrated function, right? And then the other thing is to help shape in the future, not dictate, because air-sea battle is not all about dictating. The people that dictate that are the combatant commanders, the warfighters. And they will say, this is what I need. And then the respective service barons from the different services will look at what they have and then connect the dots to be able to ensure that we are integrated. So when you build a new plane or you build a new ship, and by the way, think about partners as well. Because when you think of air-sea battle, think about Australia, think about UK, think about Japan. And there's other countries that are being opened up into this air-sea battle because that's the places, you know, that we will be partnering with many other countries overseas. I know that was a long answer, sir. I mean, actually, it would have been longer, but I got to cut it short. So hopefully, I gave you a good perspective on that because we are working in that programmatic collaboration as well as TTPs to get to help the warfighter.
Perfect.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
You have been away from D.C., as you said, for quite some time.
Yay! I mean, no, I'm glad to be back. Yes, ma'am.
What has changed most?
The roads? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. What has changed most?
In coming back to the Pentagon headquarters, and I know in one of your previous positions here, you were dealing with Congress through OLA. So just kind of looking at the atmosphere in general here in town, as well as, you know, in the Pentagon, what has changed?
Okay. Well, let me first start out by saying what has not changed. I think what has not changed has been the ability to kind of meet up with a lot of folks that I knew in the past, and that's important because, you know, anywhere, I learned this early on, and it served me well, ma'am. It's your ability to work with people. And it's your ability to make a difference in whatever effort. And it was really the people, my relationships when I was at OLA, both over across the river and here, that mattered. And so this is like a watering hole for me, you know, and it's not just for the Navy now. I can see that my portfolio has expanded so much. I'm sad to say in public that I have a lot of Zoomy friends, you know, from the Air Force, a lot of Army guys that I see them in the hallway and say, hua. So you don't get a chance to see that anywhere else, and I get to kind of like foster those relationships here. That hasn't changed. it's also unfair to try to compare how it was then and now, because the conditions have changed dramatically as to what we had then when Joe Spada and I were working the Tactical Tomahawk. Remember that, Joe? That was a good thing. And remember the Arsenal ship? You remember that old days? It was different conditions walking in there and what we were trying to build in contrast to what we have now. I mean, I would say to you, and I've known Admiral Greener for a while, since he was a one-star at Pac Fleet and going out there as a deputy. He's got a very good judicious consciousness about him. That's the best way I can say it. And I like how he leads the helm in terms of having us you know, question the assumptions, put rigor on things, communicate with each other, and just be forthright about things. So I turn that around to you to say, I come into an organization, remember I've only been here for a month and a half, that is giving their heart and soul into making sure that our Navy stays relevant. And I'll add one thing about it, because you know, it just came to me about an important message that you all should know. You know, some people will say, you know, what is the, how are we as a Navy right now, you know? And if you look at just recently, you know, the CNO gave us a great description. And for all your ship drivers, this will make a lot of sense to you. You know, when we didn't know the future of whether or not we're going to even have a continuing resolution or any of that, what do we do? What do you do when you're on a channel and you've got no visibility? You go to, if you don't have a fix, you slow down. You even stop if you don't have a fix. You get a fix. And the CNO told us to go to safe speed, you know, and we slowed down. And it seems at times that we were going at bare steerage at times. But you know what? We were trying to get a fix. And then as soon as, and the CNO gave it to us from this angle, it makes so much sense. As soon as we got that continuing resolution and we got the HR 933 pass, and then we got the control lines and stuff, we're still in the channel. And then, yeah, okay, we can pick up speed a little bit more. Not pick up the standard bell, but you pick up speed because you have a direction. And we had the funding for FY13, so we knew it. That was the kind of judicious approach that he always thinks about resources, you know? That because we weren't sure exactly, even for current year, how it's going to look like, the CNO says, all right, nobody panic, we trained for this, let's do the rigor, do your job as a team. And he got all these inputs, and then when the fog kind of cleared out ahead of us a little bit, we knew where to go. And the bow was pointed at the right way. It wasn't pointing into the rocks. I hope for all you ship drivers, that kind of got you excited, huh? I know Jay Gerardo was a former navigator. You got that. Does that make sense, ma'am? Sir.
Tom Williams, Admiral, formerly William P. Lawrence, now at the National War College.
Tom, how are you doing?
Great, sir. Sort of out of the slipstream, I saw in the press the new carrier deployment model obviously affects GFM. Could you speak to that from your
the enhanced carrier presence?
Yes, sir. From your point of view, I mean,
okay.
10 years ago it was all about operational ability.
Absolutely, Tom.
Surge presence.
Absolutely.
It's a new way of doing business.
You're going to hear, if you haven't heard already, you know, I mean, we're trying to get back to a supply-based model. And when you're going to try to say, what does that mean? Well, really, when 9/11 happened, all bets were off. And the first thing from our leadership said, where are our carriers? Where are our ships? And then we got into this surge mode. And then you got this thing called OCO, right? Overseas Contingency Operations, right? Some other people call it something else. I call it beetle nut from my Guam eyes because it was good and I liked it. And you use it a lot every day. And we had a lot of OCO. And we did a lot of things. And we stretched our resources a lot. And even to the point, even nowadays, where we did a take and then a double take. Like John C. Stennis did that double take for the surge ability to support our warfighters. Now remember, that is all in sync with the CNO's warfighting first. And the enhanced carrier presence, this ECP, knowing full well that our resources are limited and that we need to preserve the readiness and sustain the readiness of carriers, we're going to try to get to this ECP. Not that you're pushing ships out there for the sake of having presence alone, but to have presence forward Operate forward, right? Warfighting first, operate forward, be ready. I had to say that. But you do that and you sustain readiness in a supply-based model. But you're also putting your ships and your aircraft and your air wings so that we can have a little bit more predictability than having them just cycle back and forth to try to surge as many carriers out there. Now, people around the world have an input on that, obviously, and crises have an input on that, but we're trying to get back to a supply-based model as much as we can because we need to be able to maintain some of that consistency throughout the years, looking downstream. Hope that makes sense. Okay. Sir, you had a question. Oh, Rick.
Great to have you back in town. And based on your comments, you know, maybe the CNO is underutilizing all your fleet experience by bringing you back for penance here as opposed to keeping you in the fleet.
Yeah, you're right.
But anyway, obviously lots of pressure on the budget, sequestration or the threat thereof continuing, and it's not going to go away, at least not in the immediate future, several years probably. So how are you looking at policy decisions from a training perspective? Are you an M35? And what sort of impact do you think that's going to have, or how are you going to maintain the readiness, in particular your thoughts on the training, both the schoolhouse training and the operational fleet workup training?
Okay, so let me say that the man train equip folks with the Title 10, with the TICOMs, that question should go to them. How do you train? How do you get those guys? But I will use that question as an opportunity to make an observation. As a SWO, I bleed red, white, and blue SWO. Remember this. And I always thought about how we can be better. I always ask the question, how can we be better? How can we improve as a community? And to be honest, in the area of training our warfighters, training our JOs, and sustaining the maintainers, I think we can do better. Hear me out. So, you know, in my new hat as a strike group commander, I went to places I did not know because I wanted to learn, right? That's consistent theme I had. And I went to Fallon. And how many of you have been to NSOC in Fallon? Okay, you see, not too many hands. I was like that. IBU. You know, it's like, what is this NSOC that I hear about a lot? There's an SFARP and then there's an Air Wing Fallon. And they all happen up in Fallon. And they're all being trained and scrutinized and critiqued by the NSOC folks. They're Aviation Center of Excellence. Okay, now truth in advertisement, Fallon didn't happen overnight. It happened over 30 years, I'd say. 30 years to get to where we're at. But this is what I saw. This is what this poor humble shoe saw. I walked in there the first week. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Fallon. I walked in there the first week, and I saw them doing basics, just basic maneuvers, not even air combat maneuvers, just basic maneuvers. And then I start seeing them go through some of the briefings on threats and briefings on a lot of fundamental things about operating your aircraft safely. And then they went to the second week, and then they start flying as groups. Then the third week was very, very difficult. The fourth week was like incredibly hard against red assets that were flying very similar threat representative contact, and they were flying against your Okole. They were flying against your butt. And they were trying to hit you. They were trying to shoot you. And what I liked about it was here was their rigor in this Aviation Center of Excellence to train up their warfighters. They take these pilots in. I don't care if you're a nugget pilot coming out of the RAG. They take you in there and they make you plan these missions. And they critique how you plan these missions. And by the way, sir, we talk about TTPs. They had TTPs. And those pilots had to learn from those TTPs. They did not deviate for, maybe I should just answer this one piece here. And then they went into the actual execution where they actually planned how they're going to fly it, and they chalk-talked it. They flew it, and then they came back, and this is what I really think would be very helpful for SWOs. It was an open kimono, self-critical, real-time feedback on how you did on that mission. I don't care if you're the CAG. I don't care if you're in charge of the entire air wing group And if you flew that mission and you were a mission leader and you screwed it up, oh, those guys will tear them up. In fact, I thought they found glee in tearing up the CAG. And you know what was great about their culture? They took it. They were going, oh, I'm better than that. I'm the best ASW guy in the world, you know? How dare you tell me about my ship and my capabilities? No, they were all open kimono. They were going, okay, I got it. Because they know, the aviators know, one indecision may cost somebody's life in a second. So they got to be open to that. And I'm saying to you is we need to get to a center of excellence for SWOs, for our junior officers, for our warfighters that brings that rigor there. Do we have it now? Think about it. I mean, when do we get the tapes back from, you know, from the folks when we do an ASW event, other than your own OBT tapes and, you know, in-tips that you do? When do you get it back? Like 3 weeks later. My God, 3 weeks later, the JLs are worried about in-serve. Or they're worried about some other thing that we're doing for another op. Instantaneous feedback to the warfighters sitting on the councils. I think we can get there. And what about the sustainers? What about those maintainers? When some of you were still in the Navy, we still had CIMA. We still had Mo2. We had shipyards that took those engineers and trained them. So my goal is to be able to see if I was and I'm not, but in that Title 10 world, find a construct that we can make it an enduring thing where when an EN2 walks off that ship, that he comes back as an EN1 or an ENC more prepared and better to do his job and actually train his EN2 on the ship to be a good EN. And I think there's places where we can improve in that, sir. And if some of you wearing, you know, the civilian clothes but have a love for our Navy, there's a lot of things we can do to look at, you know, our plants. You know, when I was growing up, you walk through a plant, a mock-up. To be able to touch and move that, I mean, you know that we don't get underway a lot. Not anymore, right? Not in the days when Jim McManaman was out there wooden ships and they steamed out there a lot per quarter. I mean, we've narrowed down the number of days that we are underway per quarter, and you can imagine what you expect of your SWOs with that minimized time underway. Oh my gosh, they got to do everything and anything, and they don't have time but to, you know, stand the watch, do the exercise, get some sleep, maybe go through some emails. But it's really tight and compressed. So when they're in port, we got to find a way to help these guys go through some of the nomology. You know, are we talking stimulated? Can we talk simulated? I don't know. There's a lot of ways we can go hybrid in helping these maintainers. And I'm talking the maintainers. How many times you got a fireman who doesn't know his stuff and they're trying to fix something and they break it more because they don't know what to do, right? And I just think we need to get smarter on that. I know I didn't answer your question, but really that was in my rice bowl. But I gave you my perspective on what we can do better. Okay, thanks, Rick. I think I've overextended my time. That's why I wanted to be up here longer. But I really do thank all of you for coming here today. And I would say I'm not dead. So if you see me in the Pentagon, please come and see me. And if we have a chance to chat about things, I will make time for you guys. All I can say is continue to do what you do. In other words, what I'm saying is this great group of people with a common cause. They're trying to support surface warfare initiatives. Oh my gosh, relevance. Oh my gosh, that's you. You have been relevant today. And you humble me with your presence. So for all my shipmates that are here, mahalo nui loa, thank you very much for coming. And I thank you all again for being here. And once again, Dave, thanks for inviting me to talk.
Sure. Got a point, Ron. Point, yes, sir. Gumataotao, that's a coin from the Greater Washington chapter of the SNA. Thank you very much for taking time to be here today. I think we've all picked up on your energy. Admiral Boxall, I'm ready to go back to the waterfront right now.
He is coming back.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you very much, sir.